Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Ray McDonald, and I work within the Christian community for Leket Israel, the National Food Bank. We are Israel's food rescue organization. And with me, I'm really excited to have Trisha Miller with us this afternoon. Today, she is the director of CAMRA, that's Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis. What a mouthful. So you work within the Christian community, Trisha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Actually, I'm the director of the Partnership of Christians and Jews within CAMRA.
Okay.
We focus on trying to educate the Christian community more about Israel and the Jewish people and build Jews and Christians together.
Wow, excellent. Sounds exciting, challenging, but exciting. So you do a lot of writing. Your articles have appeared in a whole bunch of publications, including First Things, the New English Review, Charisma, News, Breaking Israel News, the Times of Israel, and the Jerusalem Post, Christian edition. And you've authored 2 books, 3 versions of Esther, and Jews and Anti-Judaism within Esther and the church. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And let's dive in. So Esther, tremendous story. For such a time as this, who knows, maybe God has raised you up for this moment. So I think it's really important for us as Christians to know the moment that we're in and God's plans for the church, and especially, where it relates to Israel.
Yes, it is. I did my dissertation on Esther because I wanted to address Christian anti-Semitism in particular. I was very concerned about, the 2,000 years of Christian persecution of the Jewish people. And my PhD's in Hebrew Bible, so it had to be something out from the Hebrew Bible. And Esther is a story about an attempted annihilation of the Jewish people. And there's definitely some anti-Semitism going on in the story of Esther, but also there's Christian anti-Semitism displayed throughout the centuries, through the way the book itself has been interpreted by Christians.
Wow. So the events of Esther take place in Persia, and as we're recording this, modern Iran, of course, is very much in the news lately. I think what comes to my mind, Trisha, is we'd like to think that anti-Semitism really does not exist within the church, particularly maybe the evangelical church. But I think when I think that verse that I quoted, probably the most famous or the most famous verse in that book of the Bible, I think there still is maybe a bit of an underlying, shall we say, a theological anti-Semitic. I mean, how many times have I heard a Christian saying to somebody, "Oh, you're the director of Sunday school at the church. That's great. Perhaps God has raised you up for such a time as this." I mean, so that's a piece of scripture that I hear an awful lot lately. And does it what does it mean? It was such a significant moment. Trivialize, that's the word I'm looking for. Does it trivialize the original intent and the original context of that verse?
It does. I agree. I've said that to myself before when I hear people use that verse and they have no idea of the context. It's just become so famous to say, but they don't know the context. That verse, that what you just said, was said by Mordecai to Esther when he was challenging her that she needed to take a stand. The Jewish people had been threatened with an edict. The permission was given to all of the non-Jewish people throughout the Persian Empire to kill them on a particular day. And Esther had been taken to be the queen, and she was Jewish, and her uncle or cousin, depending on how you interpret the way that they were related, but a family member who had raised her, Mordecai, was challenging her and saying, you're there, you're in the palace, and you need to take responsibility and do something. And she said, it was at risk to her life that she went to the king. She was not allowed to go to the king without being called to the king. But that's when Mordecai said, perhaps you've been put there for such a time as this. So it was at the risk of her own life that she made the decision. And she said, all right, I'll go. And if I die, I die. She knew what the potential cost would be.
Wow. So what is to us today, Christians in the 21st century, what do you see as the message to the church that we can extrapolate from the book of Esther?
Well, there's lots of good lessons, but the church has, since some of the early church fathers, not all of them, but some of the early church fathers definitely preached what we now call replacement theology, that God's finished with the Jews, they're judged, the church has replaced the Jewish people in the purposes of God. That's not true. From Genesis to Revelation, that is disproved over and over.
Wow,
but I think what we see in Esther is one thing is the lesson of the power of a lie, and the way the Jewish people even got accused and condemned to genocide, condemned to be annihilated, was there was the second in command of the kingdom was a man named Haman. And he was offended because Mordecai, the Jew, wouldn't bow to him. And Haman decided he needed to get all the Jews wiped out. So he went to the king. He couldn't do it on his own. He had to have the king's permission to wipe out the Jews. And what he did in chapter 3, verse 8, he went to the king and he said, I'm going to just read it. There is a certain people, he didn't name them, but he just said there's a certain people scattered and separated among all the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so it is not appropriate for the king to tolerate them. Okay, first of all, the first thing he said about the Jews is true. They have some different law. Their laws are different than those of every other people. They follow the Mosaic law, the laws that were given at Sinai. But then he says, and they do not keep the king's laws. That is where the lie came in, because it's obvious, this is a lengthy discussion, but it's obvious throughout Esther that Mordecai was a respected man in the kingdom, and obviously he kept the king's laws or he wouldn't have been in the prominent position he was in. So that's the lie. And I think what Christians need to understand today is how subtle the lies are in propaganda, in the news media, in everything that they read, see, hear, especially now with AI, that lies are inserted to persuade Christians to hate the Jewish people, turn on the nation of Israel, and a little bit of truth is mixed in to make it more believable. And that's what Christians need to be so aware of. It's more pervasive than ever in the media, in social media, and in so much of the teaching, even in the church.
Wow, that's a powerful message. So I want us to just unpack that a little bit. What are some of the lies that we are hearing, seeing propagated today? Israel committing genocide, not once, not twice, 3 times, I think, in Gaza. If we want to define genocide, we really just need to look, a generation or two ago in Europe, where 6 million Jews perished in the ovens of the Nazis. 1/3, I think at least 1/3 of the world Jewish population, or maybe even half, wiped out as the very definition of genocide. But when we look at Gaza, since Israel withdrew under Prime Minister Sharon, withdrew from Gaza, Gaza's population has actually doubled, in the last couple of decades. Genocide and population doubling, that's the very antithesis of a genocide, is your population is doubling. So what are some of the lies that we as Christians need to be aware of, do you think? Genocide would be one of them, that Israel's committing genocide. What should we be looking out for as Christians?
Well, that's a really important one and timely. And again, it ties into Esther, because the edict that Haman got issued was giving the Persian people, everywhere in the kingdom, the right to kill, annihilate, destroy all the Jewish people. By the time we get to chapter 8, Esther and Mordecai have been able to get the king to let them write an edict that reverses that gives them the ability to defend themselves. It's very clear in the Hebrew that all that is being allowed for the Jewish people to do is to do to them what somebody is planning to do to them. Right. In other words, the Jewish people could only defend themselves. They did not take the initiative to go out and kill people. So for all through Christian interpretation of Esther, what's been said by Christian scholars is Jews are bloodthirsty. They love to go out and kill people and then have a party and eat, because then there's a holiday instituted at the end of Esther. That ties into what is said now about Israel, and especially since October 7th, 2023, when Israel has gone into Gaza to destroy Hamas, to destroy the terrorist infrastructure that enabled the horrible atrocities that happened on October 7th, where Hamas attacked Israel. Again, it's Israel's enemies attack them first. Israel then goes to defend themselves, and they're the ones accused of all kinds of war crimes, including genocide. Wow. And as you said, the population of Gaza is now more than it was before. Genocide means an intent to wipe out a whole people. If Israel was interested in committing genocide, they just had to bomb the Gaza Strip in one day and it'd be done.
Yeah.
And they haven't. The population has grown instead. They do everything they can to prevent civilian casualties.
Wow. Okay. That's an excellent message for us. Okay, so another woman, hero of the Tanakh, the Old Testament. Let's talk a little bit about Ruth. She's especially relevant to us as Christians because she's not Jewish, and her name appears in the genealogy of Jesus.
Right.
So good things happen when Gentiles want to bless the Jewish people. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so I love this scripture from the book of Ruth. It appears right in the first chapter, verse 16. So Ruth's Jewish husband has passed away, and his mother, Ruth's mother-in-law, says, "Okay, there's nothing here for me. I'm going back home to my people. Basically, have a nice life. It was great knowing you." Okay, I'm giving you the Living Ray translation. And Ruth said, no, absolutely. I'm not going to leave you. I don't want you to turn me away. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And I love it, Trisha, when I hear Christians that they're identifying with Israel, with the Jewish people, the same way that Ruth did. Your God is my God. And just entreating the Jewish people. So that's another powerful message, I think, for Christians today, to look at Ruth and regard the Jewish people in the same way.
Yeah, it certainly is. Because, as you said, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, was trying to convince her to stay. And Naomi had two daughter-in-laws who were initially going back with her to Bethlehem
Yes.
because Naomi and her husband had gone to Moab at a time of famine. And then when the famine was over, and Naomi's husbands died and both of her sons had died. So now she has these two daughter-in-laws. All three of them are widows. And daughter-in-laws were just expected to go with their mother-in-law, I guess, at the time, because that's what they were doing. But then
Yes.
when Naomi said, you don't have to go with me, I don't have anything for you. I don't have any more sons for you to marry. I don't have anything for you. And the one daughter-in-law said, okay, bye, like you said.
Right.
But Ruth said what you said, and then, your God will be my God and your people will be my people. And she also said, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. I mean, she was making a lifetime commitment. This was
Wow.
not, and it reminds me again of Esther being called to do what she can do because of where she is in the palace at the risk of her own life. Esther said, okay, I'll do it. And if I die, I die. And then here you have Ruth saying, where you die, I will die, to her Jewish mother-in-law. These are serious commitments, and the Christians need to understand that, yes, we are called to stand with the Jewish people as Gentiles, as we are non-Jews, as the Gentile, Ruth, we are called to stand with the Jewish people no matter what.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. Um, so here's what's coming to my mind, Trisha, is anti-Semitism. Why is there anti-Semitism? Why, how do we combat anti-Semitism? And, um, you know, at its core, it's anti-Semitism, hatred of the Jewish people. Typically, there's no basis for that hate. But I think beneath the surface and at its core, I mean, we as Christians, we're bearing the image of Christ and the image of God. But the Jewish people, the Jewish male, bears God in their flesh with circumcision. Orthodox Jew who will wear a kippah and perhaps tzitzit as well. The Jewish people are the really clearest identity in humanity of God.
That's right.
And if you reject God, for so many people, the clearest, most visible way to do that is to reject the Jewish people. Ultimately, anti-Semitism is not even so much a rejection of the people of Israel, but the God of Israel.
That's right.
That's powerful. Okay, so this is very interesting. Now, I can't listen. It's impossible for me, Trisha, to talk about Ruth without mentioning Leket, the very organization that I work with. Okay, Ruth goes back. Her and Naomi, they didn't have unlimited resources. There were people who were in need. And what does Ruth do? She approaches Boaz, a relative of her mother-in-law's, and she clearly was in need. And Boaz allowed the mitzvah, the commandment of Leket to take place on his farm. So the needy, by law, were permitted to walk behind the harvesters as they went through, and anything that dropped, by law, it belonged to the needy. Because all of the resources that we have, guess what? We're not taking them with us. They don't belong to us. They belong to God, and we are simply the stewards of what God has given us. And so that's what Leket Israel is all about. It's providing food for Israel's needy. It's following it's following Ruth and that ancient biblical commandment to help the needy. It's cool.
Yeah, it is. Ruth was so committed to her mother-in-law that she actually went at great risk to the fields
Right.
with unknown, people. It wasn't safe for a single woman to just go out into the fields, but she was that committed to taking care of her mother-in-law. She knew she
Wow.
had to go get food.
That's nice.
She knew she had to get food.
Yes. Okay, Tricia. Well, thank you very much for sharing with us today. I very much enjoyed it. So, listen, how can we be in touch with you, and how can we be part of what Camera is doing?
Well, I would encourage everyone to go to the Camera website, which is www.camera.org. There is a tab at the top that has the different departments within Camera, and the partnership is one of those. And there's a tab you can also see the partnership website, which is cameraspartnership.org.
Right.
But I put out a newsletter only once or twice a month. I don't swamp your inboxes. If anybody would like to be on my mailing list to get information about Israel that's particularly relevant to Christians, then please email me and tell me you want to be signed up for the newsletter. And it's Tricia, Tricia, at camera.org.
Excellent. So I'll provide the links below. Thanks again, and please like and subscribe so we can share with more people what's happening in Israel. Thank you again, Tricia. God bless.
Thank you. God bless you.